Okay, where is my YouTube? Okay. Okay. Oh, Alt space is a shortcut to Copilot, which is really unnecessary since my keyboard has a Copilot button. That's cool. No, I don't want that. There we go. Okay. Yeah, that's Microsoft's AI assistant thing. I think much of its promise is likely to go unfulfilled. Like everyone's like, it's going to change everything, and I'm like, it'll change some things. Like I wouldn't advise anyone to become a radiologist at the moment, but because AI is way better at reading medical scans than humans and way faster at it. But I deeply suspect it's not going to like transform the world as much as people think it will. Yes, that isn't. I guess I could do that. I don't, but I could. Why are you talking about my Chiburashka? Why are you talking about my Chiburashka? I'm just saying that I recognize it from your profile picture. Yes. He is my spirit animal. Chiburashka is my spirit animal. A small unknown animal of unknown origins. That is me. Okay. What's that? Well, he was found in a crate of mandarins, right? So there we go. What's that? No, it's sort of like the Soviet version of Mickey Mouse. Yeah, like if there was a Soviet Mickey Mouse, it's Chiburashka. And it's like been, where's my mouse? I lost my mouse. Okay. It's been long beloved of Russian children. And just this last year, they made like a, one of those movies where they mix live action and animation, and the resulting Chiburashka was horrifying. So I have no more to say about this. I was excited about it, and then I saw it, and I was like, "Whoa, it's terrible." His friend is a crocodile who works at the zoo as a crocodile, except in the live action picture, it's just a dude. And I'm like, "Aw." But part of the whimsy was that this crocodile goes to the zoo and punches his time card and sits in the zoo being a crocodile, and then punches out and goes home. And I don't know why that's whimsical, but it just made me laugh. So, I have a strange mind. I'm sorry. Okay, let's talk about survey questions. Yeah, he's horrifying, isn't he? He looks really bad. Yeah, there's some nightmare fuel right there. Oh, Russian culture. What do you do? Okay. Who am I? What am I? Why am I here? I'm teaching you methods. Omne. Okay, sorry. I'm just like really tired today, and it's been just a running around kind of day. I've created exams. I've put in multiple choice questions for a class on work and industry because the textbook publisher couldn't be bothered to give instructors proper resources. Last time I do that. So am I childish? Oh, definitely. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about designing survey questions. And we'll see if we can figure out, mostly I'm telling you like things to do and things not to do. But we'll try also to kind of look at some of the landmines in question design. And then I have some examples, and you'll look at them, and you'll tell me what you think is wrong with them, or right with them. We'll see. Okay, so keep in mind what you actually want to learn. Right, with your questions, one of the things, I got the hiccups apparently. One of the mistakes that people can make in writing questions is not asking themselves, does this help me to answer my research question? So you might get feedback, probably from L'Oreal, that sort of comes down to, okay, interesting question. How does this question help you answer your research question or get the data that you want, right? So this is often kind of an operationalization problem if you don't kind of keep that in mind, right? You're asking questions that aren't going to get you data that's going to help you answer your question. So, there you'd have to worry about things like measurement validity, right? Because you might get, if your questions are not asking about your research topic, you're going to have that target where you're getting a bunch of data over here, but it's missing the center of your target. That looks like an angry bird. Okay. Right. I don't know why I said that. Okay, so yeah, focus on what you want to know. Be specific, right? If you want to know about standard of living, you can ask questions about standard of living. How many children they have, what kind of home they live in, or how many children they have at home. So how expensive their life is versus how many children they have, right? So this is why, like in most surveys, you barely ever see this question. If someone's wanting to ask like family structure, standard of living, cost of living, how many children are living at home, because if your children have moved out, that changes things in terms of that calculation. Okay, and very important, I'm going to switch to green to show you how important this one is. Put yourself in the position of the respondent. How would you answer the question? And if you're not sure, then it's a bad question. And, we'll talk about some of the kind of foibles here. But, like, if you were to ask someone, I'm going to be really ridiculous about this. What did you eat? What did you eat January 3rd of 2020? Could you answer that question? Right? So I'm being absurd, but don't ask your participants questions that you yourself would struggle to answer, right? So how would you answer the question? Is it possible to answer the question? Always, test your questions on yourself and pilot them on other people, because people will be like, I don't know. And I will force you to do this, because your third mini lab is to write a short survey, like a bunch of survey questions, and then you have to have someone take your survey and then tell me what you learned from their feedback. So it'll be fun. Okay. These are all avoids. So you should avoid all of these things, in case you couldn't tell by the repeated use of the word avoid. Okay, avoid ambiguous terms. So if you want to know something specific, ask a very specific question. So even sometimes commonly used terms, right? So the example here is income. Income can be vague. What does it include? So, for someone in the service industry, in the restaurant industry, does it include tips? Or does it just include their salary? Does it include investment income? Do you mean after-tax income? What do you actually mean? So, be specific, right? If you want before-tax income, you're asking about someone's salary, right? You want to make sure that you ask that, like, how much do you earn before taxes annually, right? And this can be a problem because it can make your data really hard to interpret. And I was just looking at this kind of, 2 days ago. There was this survey that came out of England. And it's really interesting, again, because or the UK, because I'm a sociology of religion nerd and I love the topic, it's super fun. There was this survey, and basically it had kind of two categories that people were talking about. And one was like per generation, the number of atheists. I wonder if I could pull it up for you. No, I'd have to log into Twitter. Is it worth it? No, it's not worth it. Okay, so it was per generation number of atheists, and then per generation people who consider themselves spiritual. And it was, basically what it showed was that Gen Z was less likely to say that they were an atheist, and much more likely than the other generations to say they were spiritual. I was like, cool, that's really interesting. What the hell does spiritual mean, right? Because people can interpret that really, really, really differently, the term is kind of vague and ambiguous. So there were people, and people who should know better, actually, were like, yeah, there's a religious revival going on in the UK. And I'm like, but what does spiritual mean? Like, does that mean they're doing yoga? Does it mean they're going to church every week? In which case, I don't believe the statistic, because I know the church-going statistics in the UK, and they're dismal. So what does it mean, right? So a term like spiritual, like, do you consider yourself spiritual? That term is really, really vague, right? So what are you actually asking? What do you want to mean? I would say avoid ambiguous terms. This is going to give you bad data. And again, if spirituality is, you're constructing it broadly, maybe to get a certain result in that case. I don't know. I don't want to denigrate people. So this one, I would say yes and no. Avoid asking long questions. Respondents may lose track of what the question is asking. Sometimes there's no way around this, because sometimes in order to get the nuanced detail you want so as not to be vague, you actually have to ask fairly long questions. So I would say try to be as brief as possible in your, in the way that you ask questions. Say as little as possible in them, because you don't want your respondents to lose track of what the question is asking. So avoiding long questions is not, I don't want to be too definitive on this, because sometimes you have to, but be as brief as possible. And if you looked at my survey that I did a few years ago for Catholic institutions, the questions are pretty long. I couldn't condense them down any further. You just kind of have to deal with it at some point. Okay. Avoid double-barreled questions. This is probably one of the most common errors that people make, is asking double-barreled questions. And a double-barreled question is basically any question that's asking two things at the same time. So your respondent might not know what they're actually responding to, and you, in reading it, will not know which part they were responding to. Okay, so for this question, was the course interesting and informative? Well, what if the course was interesting but not informative? I actually don't know how that's possible. But what if it was, let's say, it was informative but not interesting, right? Like, you got a lot of information out of it, but the course was really, really boring. I don't know, say Introduction to Social Methods, right? No, I'm kidding. Am I? I can't tell anymore. Right? You don't, as a reader, you don't know, like, if you found it interesting but not informative, I would never phrase it as a was. I would always put it as a statement, but that's another, because then you could use a Likert scale. The course was interesting and informative, right? Strongly agree, neither agree nor disagree, strongly disagree. Well, if it was informative but not interesting, how do you answer that question? Double barrel questions can be really hard for people to answer. How satisfied are you with your pay and working conditions? Again, you could really love where you're working, right? The working conditions are great. It's safe. The people you work with are lovely. There's a coffee pot, right? There's a Keurig machine, so you get free coffee or whatever, but the pay sucks, right? How would you answer that question? Or the other way, right? You work in a really, you're one of those dangerous catch guys, right? You're on the crab boat in the North Pacific in December, and it pays really well, but your chances of dying are really high. How would you answer that question? You wouldn't be able to, because there's two questions there. Now, this can get really wild. And this is where sometimes I have a lot of fun, because I have seen questions with as many as 6 barrels, where someone is literally asking 6 things at once, and the question is like, it's unanswerable, right? I hope one day to see the legendary 8-barreled question, or at least a 7-barreled question. It's like my unicorn. So just avoid, like, with a double-barreled question, right? It's probably two questions. Was the course interesting? Was it informative? Those are easy to answer. Are you satisfied with your pay? Easy to answer. Are you satisfied with your working conditions? Easy to answer, right? So just make sure your questions are asking one thing at a time. And it can be really easy to slip into this, right? Even good survey writers occasionally create a double-barreled question without meaning to. So, just always read them back and be like, is this asking one thing? Okay. Yeah, avoid very general questions. What do you think of the Prime Minister, right? Who is the Prime Minister now? Is it still him? Forgotten, but not gone. That's how we'll talk about Trudeau. Oh yes, Mark Carney. Good times. We're doomed. Okay. Pierre Poilievre, we're also doomed. Okay. So try to ask very specific questions. What do you know? What do you want to know about the Prime Minister? Like, what do you think of the Prime Minister? What do you think about the Prime Minister's job performance? Do you agree with the Prime Minister's decision to resign? Ask a very specific question rather than just, do you approve of the job the Prime Minister is doing, right? Or, sorry, I put it on a scale, but whatever. If you want to know something about the Prime Minister or the professor or whatever, ask a very specific question about an aspect of this person. Don't ask a very general question. Okay. Avoid leading questions. I like this one. Should the monarchy, and here's where it's leading, which costs the taxpayers over $5 million a year, be abolished? Well, of course, almost anyone's going to say, well, I can't believe it costs $5 million a year. Yes, of course it should be abolished, right? Should Prime Minister Trudeau, who has done a terrible job, resign his post as Prime Minister, right? Should Pierre Poilievre, who is a twerp, I don't know. I don't know how to finish that question, right? You get the kind of I don't mind Poilievre. I think of him so little, I can't even be bothered. But whatever it happens to be, right? Try to think of, there's all sorts of leading questions you could ask, right? You don't want to suggest an answer to your, to your readers or to the people doing your survey, because you're kind of putting your thumb on the scale a little bit. And that's not the point of doing a survey. You're trying to get people's information. And again, it can be easy to accidentally put a little thing in here, that might lead people in a particular direction. So it's best to avoid it if possible. If you need to give people a key piece of information as part of the question, you can, right? But and sometimes, okay, I will say, sometimes, I wouldn't say they're leading questions, but questions with a lot of information. One of the things I would do is ask a more general question. Something like, okay, should the monarchy be abolished? I don't know why I'm writing it out again, but it's fun. Okay, and then, you get the response. Then you can add a slightly more kind of informational question. So what's useful here is then you get a kind of like unvarnished view, right? Like this is what they kind of think before you give them any context. And then you ask them like, the monarchy costs, $5 million a year to the taxpayers. Does this change your view? Or, basically ask the same question and ask that more leading form of it to see if that extra information actually does kind of affect people's view, but I would always pair it with the more neutral question, and usually kind of separate them a little bit in the survey, just so that you get that unvarnished view, and then you can compare. Like, okay, if people don't have that extra piece of information, should they, what do they say? And then if they have a little bit more pertinent information, how does that change their view? I mean, so I had this, I think I showed you these questions when I did this survey of the general public on Catholic institutions for a Catholic group. I asked, okay, should Catholic institutions be allowed to run based on faith-based, that receive public funding, be allowed to run on faith-based values, right? And I had a bunch of options. And then I was like, basically the same questions. Should the Catholic schools, that receive public funding, be allowed to run on faith-based values, including things like, hiring only Catholics, banning gay-straight alliances. There was another one, I can't remember what it was, right? And then, there was a kind of interesting thing there. When you showed people specifics, the views were very different as opposed to a general question, which was kind of an interesting thing. Yeah.
Regards to this, does that still not bring up a lot of issues? Like, you can't really present the full information of the monarchy and just transparent costs.
I mean, it's a survey, right? So you're never gonna. You might be focusing on one kind of very specific kind of aspect of it. So you could ask a bunch of these questions, right? A bunch of different things. Excuse me. But yeah, I mean, you're never going to get unless you were to begin your question with an essay, in which case your desistance rate or your failure rate would be 100%. It's impossible to provide enough context, right? So there are flaws with the tool. It's not always great for perfect nuance. So. Okay, I think I've probably said enough about this, or too much. Okay, avoid questions that are actually two questions. Slightly different than a double-barreled question, right? And this is often sort of something that's assuming the first part of the question, or assuming let's use a legal term, assuming a fact that's not in evidence. So something like the example here, right? On a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you like Stephen King novels? You're assuming in that question that someone reads a Stephen King novel and that they have an opinion on it, right? So yeah, you've got two questions here, but you're not asking the first one, so you're going to get a lot of confusion, right? If the person doesn't read Stephen King novels, how are they going to answer? They're probably going to give you a 1, right? On a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you like reading them? Well, I don't read them at all, so I'm going to give you a 1, but that doesn't really tell you, how much they enjoy Stephen King novels. It just tells you that they don't read them. Better, do you read, to split it again into two questions. And the first one's a filtering question, right? Do you read Stephen King novels? And if so, what's your rating of them on a scale of 1 to 5? Pretty straightforward, right? And just sometimes we assume that people will have an opinion, right? And we don't ask them. So you want to make sure that you're asking it. And in in a lot of cases, you might filter them out, and then you don't ask the second question if they don't read Stephen King novels, right? So there's that. Okay. Avoid. Is that my last avoid? I think it is. Questions that include negatives, especially double negatives. Do you oppose rules stating that laptops are not allowed in the classroom? What is this question asking, right? Basically, do you oppose rules, or do you think laptops should be allowed in the classroom, right? That's what the question is actually asking. But the way it's phrased is a little bit confusing because you've got, the oppose and the not in there. and you can imagine a million ways that you could use these things. You could write really confusing questions with negations. Are you opposed to the Liberal government not calling an election immediately, right? Again, you're sort of, I don't know, I'm drawing on politics today. That's not a terrible question, but it would be better stated like, do you think the government should call an election today, right? The positive is easier to interpret for people than the negative. Okay. Minimize technical terms. I mean, unless you know that the people doing your survey are a highly technical audience, you probably want to assume that people are pretty basic in their understanding. And this can be really awkward. Are you just stretching, or is that a question? Okay, I gotcha. So, I'll tell you, can I tell you a story? I'll tell you a story. Story time. So when I was doing this research in 2019, 2020 for this Catholic group, one of the things that they were really interested in was people's opinions of the principles of Catholic social teaching. Now, the principles of Catholic social teaching are not actually that hard to find. There are documents and websites that outline the core of Catholic social teaching, but they're worded in such a way as they're sort of shrouded in what you might call Catholicese, right? Really, really Catholic language. Like the Catholic Church has a bunch of environmental beliefs, and I'm trying to remember what the phrasing was, but it's something like, the care of creation is a core duty of human beings, right? And they wanted to know how people, to what people agreed with that tenet of social teaching. Care of the poor is a paramount responsibility of individuals and the state. And there's a bunch of others, right? So one of the things that I had to do, because I basically wrote those things down, and I put some like strongly agrees to strongly disagrees under the tenets of Catholic social teaching. And then I took the survey to my friend Dorothy, and I was like, okay, great, could you critique this? And she's like, what the fuck does this mean? I'm like, it means, do people care about the environment? Do they think protecting the environment is important? It's like, why didn't you just write, do you think protecting the environment is important? I'm like, because the Catholic Church phrases it this way. And she was like, great. Are people going to understand what that means? And as you go down, they get more and more obscure, right? And harder to read. So I was using a very technical kind of language. Here it was theological language. See, even I make stupid mistakes. Lots of them. So you want to minimize things down. And if there's like something technical that you're wanting to ask about, it's okay to do it, but you're going to have to really simplify that down into terms that, your brother or sister that's in 10th grade could understand. And just kind of assume that people, A, are not paying that close of attention, and the jargon is not going to be that well known. So avoid jargon. And this can be hard for sociologists sometimes, because we do get kind of mired down in jargon. We have our own kind of technical jargons within the discipline. So you just want to make sure that you're avoiding jargon. Okay. And be sure your respondents will have the knowledge needed to answer the question. If you're not sure, even though I don't love it, you might put a don't know in. But you should kind of, can people answer the questions as you're asking them? And if not, right, you might have to rephrase questions. Again, you can ask questions in such a way as to get people to answer even things that they might not have a lot of technical knowledge on. Okay. Does that all make sense? All right. So, I think I've told you about this before. You need symmetry between a closed question and its answers. Basically, the answers have to make sense, right, in terms of what the question is. Now, I know this probably seems really basic, but the number of times I've seen people, maybe because they're rushing to do assignments, get this wrong is considerable. So like this was one I actually pulled off of someone's assignment a few years ago. How satisfied are you with your life in general? And the options were very good, good, middling, poor, very poor. So how satisfied, so if I read this and I circle good, how satisfied am I? I don't know because it doesn't make any sense, right? How satisfied are you with your life? Good. Okay. Do you think Justin Trudeau should resign tomorrow? Strongly agree. Doesn't really work, right? Because it's kind of a yes or no question. There's no symmetry there. There's a lot of examples. I'll show you some in a sec. But this one should be very satisfied, somewhat satisfied, neither satisfied nor dissatisfied, etc., right? Getting this wrong means it's like funny to read and then read an answer. How satisfied are you with your life in general? Poor. So poor. Okay, you get the idea. All right, and ensure that your answers are balanced. Overall, the quality of instruction in this course was excellent, very good, good, satisfactory, or poor. Okay, so what do you think is wrong with that?
They're kind of biasing it towards like the higher quality answers.
Right, there's excellent and very good, what's the difference between them? And they're all good. Good and satisfactory. You're also leaving the people who were maybe all they have is poor to go with. It's like, dude, you suck. So yeah, you want to make sure that you have, usually, like the way that people usually structure this is they have 2 positive, a neutral, and 2 negatives, right? So kind of like very satisfied, somewhat satisfied, neither satisfied or dissatisfied, dissatisfied, very dissatisfied, right? How was the quality of the course? It was excellent, good, well, let's say, I don't know what the other term would be, maybe satisfactory, poor, and then satisfactory is like, it's okay, right? So you have 2 kind of positives, 2 kind of negatives, but you want to make sure it's balanced, right? So you don't have everything. It's like, how was today's lecture? Was it very good, great, amazing, wonderful, stupendous, or just okay, right? You get the idea. Okay, super common mistake here too. Again, I've seen a ton of students make this mistake. Don't overstretch people's memories, right? So I think it's now lost a little bit of its salience, but a couple of years ago, everybody wanted to do surveys about COVID, right? Everything was about COVID. Thank God that's not true anymore. Everything's about TikTok now. No, I'm kidding. But one of the things that people would do, and it was always, I'm like, are people going to remember that? I remember one in particular where people were like, so how much did you exercise at the beginning of COVID? And they wanted to compare that with their mental health, right? And how did it affect your mental health? And I'm like, okay, well, it's now 2023. That was 2020. How would you answer that? I'm like, well, I don't remember, how much I exercised. I'm going to guess not a lot. And what my mental health was like, I don't really know, right? Because my memory doesn't go back that far. So this is why we tend to avoid asking about the past, at least in really kind of very specific details. Because people will often not remember the past very clearly. As you go further back in the past, it gets really, really hard to answer accurately. Like very quickly, what did you have for breakfast last Monday? Not the Monday 2 days ago, but the Monday before. Cereal, what kind? Okay, you're not helping me. You're ruining my point. I'm kidding. It's good. Some people will eat cereal really regularly, right? But other people won't. What did you have for breakfast when you were 4? Like no one, you have no idea, right? How many times did you exercise in the month of March of 2024? Right, no idea. No, tell me seriously, how much? How often? No, I'm kidding. No idea, right? And how would you? It's just not something that's that memorable, right? So, most people are not paying attention to most things most days, right? So you can't ask respondents to remember things they've done in observed in detail, right? That's too far in the past, right? Things that happened yesterday, maybe. Things that happened today, probably. Things that happened a week ago, it gets dicey. So don't overstretch people's memories, right? Don't expect them to remember things from a long time ago, and definitely not accurately. Okay, so talked about this, I think, earlier. Don't know. I don't know how to talk about this. No, I'm kidding. Don't knows, people put them in as an exit, right? For people who don't want to answer. And not always, but I frequently find don't know to be a very, very frustrating answer that people include on surveys, because sometimes it's just like, come on, of course your respondent knows, right? There are certain things that they're going to know, and you're just putting it as like an exit clause, right? Right. What are some of them? Race is a tough one. Sometimes people put it in races and they put in don't know. I tend to think most people know what group they belong to. Right. Oh, the one I gave you before was the one that drives me absolutely bonkers is, how old are you? And I've seen people do this on surveys. How old are you? And it's a box, or you can check don't know. And I'm like, outside of people who have like dementia, how many people don't know how old they are? Or like 3-year-olds. Actually, at 3, my 3-year-old could tell you how old he was, right? He could have filled in that box. And it's like a weird thing where what people are actually getting at is not that people don't know, it's prefer not to answer, which I'm okay with, but it's kind of, prefer not to answer. I've seen this done for income too, right? Where people are like, how much on average do you make in a year? And typically you give this in ranges, right? So it's like, less than 25,000, and then you move those numbers up, in different scales. And then people have a don't know option. And I'm like, I think what you're wanting there is prefer not to answer, not don't know, because I think most people know how much money they make, roughly. Okay. It's usually people put it to prevent forcing respondents from choosing, but actually, it's an easy way out of certain questions, and that's why you shouldn't use it. Now, you can use don't know on some opinion questions, right? Oh, you have a question. Oh, yeah, on some opinion questions where you suspect that people don't have an opinion or might not know about a specific topic, you can put don't know or no opinion, right? That's fine. But it should be used very sparingly, and definitely not as an exit clause, right? Not as like, you don't want to tell me your age? Fine, you can put don't know. Prefer not to answer is better there. So did I answer your question? Was that what you were asking?
Yeah, I was like, I see these more probably demographically questions.
See, I would put prefer not to answer instead of don't know. Because don't know, again, seems unlikely to me on a lot of the demographic stuff, right? Again, like sometimes for, let me think, like, gender. Gender's getting to be an increasingly tough one to talk about. And so I've seen people put don't know. But I think, instead you have, your male, female, transgender, non-binary, and whatever options you want to put. And then you can put other, so they can fill it in if the option they prefer isn't there, or prefer not to answer if they would prefer not to answer, both as options. Yeah.
Not all of those mutually exclusive.
What do you mean?
You can have a transgender person like not all transgender people will be the same gender.
Oh yeah, I'm just like, you can have a very exhaustive list, right? But yeah, I mean it's
Like a checkbox or
yeah, or you can have a bunch of check. You can have select all that applies too. And like I said, gender is becoming increasingly tricky to ask on surveys for that reason. But I wouldn't put don't know on that. I would put prefer not to answer or other, right? But you could do like check all that apply or, other for, however people want to identify. If you didn't include it in your list of, what you think are the kind of probably top 10 options. Yeah, please.
In gender, do you have to be exhaustive or you can put them in and then like order?
So most of the time I've actually seen people put, I think 4 is the most common one now, and it's like male, female, transgender, and non-binary, and then other, for people who want to put in a different option. That's, I think, kind of what I've seen as being really common in surveys. But I've seen others where there's 15 or 20 choices, which can be a little bit overwhelming to look at times, which is why I think people prefer, kind of these 4 and then other and prefer not to answer. Again, I wouldn't. My point is more, I wouldn't put don't know here. I would put more, if you don't want to answer, you don't have to. But that in itself, I think, is more interesting than don't know, because I don't know what's inside that don't know box. If don't know is a box, I don't know. Like, there's always something I'm suspicious of someone like trying to get out of the question instead of prefer not to answer, which I think tells me more. Sorry, did I answer both your questions? Okay, perfect. All right. So question order, we were talking about this the other day. I'm always, in favor of putting demographic questions at the end for all sorts of reasons. And you were saying it's because people are now think you're like with the CIA and they're trying to steal your a scammer. Okay, right. But I will take your credit card if you don't mind. That's fair. Yeah, so question or I can't believe people are still doing phone surveys, honestly. I can't imagine this is very fruitful. Yeah. Yeah. How often? I feel bad for you because I cannot imagine that's a pleasant experience.
It's not.
Yeah.
But everything, like, and all people are the ones who tend to be very nice, but then they keep talking and like, I cannot say that. Like,
I have 75 calls to make today. Please stop talking to me. Oh, God. Okay. That's funny. I'm always really nice to phone surveys. And I'm not old.
don't like to be there.
I kind of assume that that's true. And I figure if you're stuck for a company that's still doing phone surveys, you're in bad shape. And I know you don't get paid, so that's even worse. All right. So, question order. Yeah, I mean, it matters. Like I said, I put demographics at the end. Some people put it at the beginning. Those people are wrong. No, I'm kidding, but they are wrong. Okay. Okay, all respondents should get the same questions, right? Sometimes there's options to shuffle questions, but generally speaking, you want to give people questions in the same order unless you're testing, right? And this is more an experimental design for order of effects, right? So if you want to say, if you ask, I don't know, let's go back to the monarchy, right? If you asked a bunch of people questions about Prince Charles, right? How they felt about his divorce from Princess Diana, how they feel about his relationship with his nitwit of a son, Harry. Whatever. I don't like Harry. Whatever it happens to be, right? Moving down a list, and you wanted to see how that would affect their, what their answers on, like, should the monarchy be abolished? Versus if you asked, should the monarchy be abolished, and then asked a bunch of questions about Prince Charles or King Charles, I guess, not Prince Charles anymore. King Charles and his family, right? If you ask them in different orders, would that change people's opinions, right? So you're testing for order effects there. Unless you're doing order effects, everybody should get the same order. Your early questions, you want them to be related to directly to the announced research topic. So people shouldn't feel like they're being tricked, right? It's like, I want to talk to you about cheese. All the cheese questions should be at the beginning, right? Cheese is a very silly topic. But whatever it happens to be, right? Brands, their opinion on politicians, right? Whatever it happens to be, load those really relevant questions up at the top of your survey. So presumably people agreed to be part of a survey for a reason, right? So the questions that they're going to be really interested in, you should put up at the top. I'm just checking the time. Okay. Sensitive questions, right? So if there's any sensitive questions, right? And here, like, have you ever been the victim of sexual assault? Obviously, be a very sensitive question. You should ask it sort of in the middle of your survey. And here, right, I guess the reasoning is you want to take advantage of people's sunk cost bias. So if you asked a question like that right at the beginning, people haven't really invested enough time that they would hesitate to jump out at the end, right? But if you've asked it, maybe you've been going for 10 minutes out of your 15-minute survey, and then you ask your very sensitive questions, people are less likely to quit because of what's called sunk cost bias. They've already put 10 minutes into this, so they're more likely to just see it through than if you asked it at the beginning. Now, why wouldn't you ask it at the end? Well, more people are likely to get upset if this is the last thing if the sensitive stuff is all left for the end, and it may lead to a bad taste in their mouth, and you're going to get kind of more complaints about the survey in general than if you kind of bury it in the middle, right? So you typically, right, ask these sensitive questions, and then for me, you go to demographics. You ask them a bunch of questions that are really, really easy to answer. Where do you live? Like, what's your postal code? How much money do you make? Blah, blah, blah. Male, female, race, gender, race, all that fun stuff, right? Ask that at the end, and it kind of cushions the end of your survey. So, straightforward, I think. Okay. All right, we talked about this already. Avoid provoking a response set. And a response set exists if responses are motivated by something other than a person's actual feelings about the items. The most common one is, I want to get out of this survey, so I just fill in, agree for every question on your Likert scale, right? So you've got, 5 options, and they're just going here for the whole thing. That's the most common one, right? Using multiple item measures is a way, and like I said, increasingly online survey makers are using unrelated questions and relatively silly ones, right? Like, which one of these is an animal, right? And they'll give you 4 things, only one of which is an animal, and you're supposed to pick one to see if you're actually paying attention. You might see that 2 or 3 times in a survey. I know Abacus and Leger both do this quite frequently, just to make sure that the person is actually following and not just kind of doing this or randomly choosing answers, right? Because if they're randomly choosing answers, it's going to be like, which one is an animal? Apple, right? Okay. There we go. Okay. Here, we're gonna quiz you. See how well you've absorbed my lessons. What do you think of this question? And is there anything wrong with it? So what upsets you most about Alberta's provincial government? Is it their policies, their ethics, their ideology, or the politicians? What, if anything, is wrong with this? Yeah, Sasha.
So I guess we're assuming the what I've said.
Okay.
And then also, I had something like
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, there could definitely be other options, for sure.
I don't know if this was mentioned, but just the fact that it's like two questions in one, you don't necessarily know that people are upset about Alberta's provincial government.
Oh, we of course mentioned this. It was right here on the Stephen King question, right? Avoid asking a question that's actually two questions. So yeah, absolutely. There's two questions here. One is, are you upset? And the other one is, what upsets you? Anything else about this that might be slightly problematic? Fire away.
it's like the answers aren't usually
Yeah, I mean, so you might want here, select all that apply, right? Is it a bit leading too? Yeah, Reg. Oh, it definitely does. Yeah. So it assumes knowledge they may not have. And it's a bit leading, right? So this question, which I wrote, is a bad question. Sometimes writing a bad question is actually really hard because you have to really think. Okay. How would you rate the features and adoptions of the Universities of Alberta's new online learning software? Yeah, Reg. Okay, definitely. The features and adoption. So it's a double barrel question. So what if the features are bad and the adoption was good? Or the adoption was bad, but the feature, did I just say the same thing twice? The features are good, the adoption's bad, or the features are bad and the adoption's good, right? It could be either one of those things, and how would you know? Okay. Anything else on this question? No? Okay. I'm just curious, what do you think? Does the scale match the question? Is it well, can you answer it? It's not bad, right? Very good. The features are very good. The adoption is very good. Yeah, so I think that works. Okay. How many times did you eat eggs last year? Okay, yeah, so do you remember? Probably not. Yeah. There's no zero, right? There's no zero. No zero option. Anything else? Well, yeah, so that's there's no zero, right?
I guess that is
What about the last option? Like, what about how exhaustive this is? What's kind of the problem with the scale here? There could be a lot beyond 30, right? So you're like 1 to 10, which is a big range, right? 11 to 20, 21 to 30, and more than 30 times. Beyond that, you don't really have anything here. That would be a much better scale than this. Yeah, like daily, once a week, several times a month, right? Once a month or less, those would be better scales. It's still a kind of a bad question, but that would be a much better scale than trying to get people to remember specifically how many times in a year, and then just having like, well, if they ate it more than 20 or more than 30, I'm just going to put everyone who ate it more than 30 times in one big category at the end, and who knows, right? Okay. How satisfied are you with your student experience at U of A? Yeah, please.
I think like the kind of the first generation today sees the fact that it's like they're all like there's 4 options for satisfied and only one like for dissatisfied. There's nothing that's like neither satisfied, neither dissatisfied.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, right, all of these are positive, right? And only this one is negative. So my scale is extremely unbalanced here. Good. Have you ever been denied okay, so this is actually a student question. And I had to take it because it was too good. Have you ever been denied a job opportunity or promotion because of your criminal conviction? Strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. So there's a couple problems here. Yeah, please. Okay, in what way?
Well, asking, have you ever been denied, and then to just say strongly agree. It just doesn't make sense.
Right. Have you ever been denied a job opportunity? Strongly agree. Now you can fix that relatively easily by making it into a statement, right? Like, I believe I've been denied. Then it's symmetrical. But yeah, this is a question, and you're using things that make sense for agreement with a statement, right? So you're absolutely right. Any other problems with this question?
You have a job opportunity or promotion, but like, okay. I think kind of what she's trying to say is the fact that it's like almost 2 questions because if you've been denied a job opportunity, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a job to be able to get offered a promotion in the first place.
Right. It's double-barreled, right?
Yeah.
You've got 2 questions here. It's a double-barrel question: a job opportunity or promotion. Well, again, what if you have been denied a job opportunity but not a promotion, or a promotion but you got the job, right? The question itself would get hard to answer. Yeah, please.
Assuming that you've got a criminal conviction.
Yeah, I mean, so this was going to be a survey of people who had been convicted of crimes. So, that would have been fair game. I will give the student that. They goofed on this question. The funnier part is the answer set, right? Because it totally doesn't fit the question. But yeah, please.
Yeah, for me, actually, do we have to adhere to the first 2
You can. And I mean, the idea is that you're going to kind of build each assignment on top of the other and then put it into the major lab.
But what happens if I'm doing something like crime and I don't have criminal friends?
Like, oh, for testing it, you mean? Well, I believe your friends should pretend like.
So they
like-
can give fake answers.
Oh yeah, of course. You don't have to do a real survey. Just have them put on like an eye patch and draw a fake tattoo on their arm or something, and smoke a Popeye's candy stick, and then act like a criminal, and you'll be fine, right? Like maybe watch some of The Wire or Breaking Bad before, so they can like become the character. Like get them to do some method acting for your test. This is good. It doesn't have to be real answers. You're more looking for people to just like look at your questions and see if they make sense, right? So they can become the character, like.
I'll say that that's a requirement.
What's that?
I'll tell them that that's a requirement.
Okay, yeah, they have to pretend. Yeah, or just walk down the street and find some criminals and have them do No, don't do that. That sounds really dangerous. That's a terrible idea. I did not recommend that to you. The recording of this lecture will be scrubbed of my terrible. Okay. I believe the Prime Minister is a competent and charismatic leader. Okay, obviously it's double-barreled, right? Competent and charismatic. You're asking 2 things, so which one are they agreeing with? If he's not competent, but he's charismatic, how would you answer this? I won't give you the opposite. Okay. Which of these would you prefer for breakfast? Tea and bread, coffee, oats, or cereal? Yeah.
Tea and bread doesn't make sense compared to like
assuming some people just don't eat.
That they just have coffee. So this again, by the way, this was a really bad student question. So I have to give it to this person. Any other so okay. Okay, it's not exhaustive. Yes, like.
And what were they trying to get at?
What were they? So if I recall this one correctly, they were trying to understand the link between like nutrition, and specifically breakfast, and mental health. But apparently these were the only 4 options they could imagine for people in having breakfast, right?
Would you not want to break it down, like more into like breakfast drinks and then like breakfast solid?
Okay, well, how would you fix like breakfast drinks and salads? That makes breakfast sound awful. It's like,
Say like
which breakfast solid did you eat today? And what foul breakfast slime did you consume? Right. How would you fit? Like, give me some
say,
thoughts.
Like, what is your preferred drink at breakfast time? Go with coffee, tea, water, hot chocolate.
Okay, so you're talking about, we're going to break this into 2 completely different questions. One about what do you drink for breakfast, and then what do you eat for breakfast?
Otherwise, you're gonna do tea and bread, but maybe you do eat bread.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why tea and bread are an option together. That was really strange. Yeah, please.
But more so referring to like heavy grain breakfast or like heavy protein, rice based or such and such.
Okay, yeah, fruit, maybe fruit, meat, like bacon, ham, sausage. Yeah.
I don't know, it's just the fact that just assume that everybody has breakfast. Like, some people just have like lunch and dinner, they're not like breakfast people.
Yeah, I don't ever eat breakfast. I can't eat in the morning. It makes me feel sick. Yeah, so don't know. No, I'm kidding. You would not put don't know because that's ridiculous. Don't eat breakfast, right? You should probably have some option. Okay. Any other? There's maybe an obvious one that we could talk about for how you would fix the response set here. Oh, I think that's what Sasha was saying. Is you definitely need like drinks and food separated. Oh, sure. Yeah, you could ask that. So yeah, please go ahead.
I think because you were saying the fact that you were measuring like breakfast and mental health, I think like just a question Jenny could say is like kind of like referring back to the egg, was like how often do you usually eat breakfast? Like every single day?
Several times a week.
Several times a week, several times a month.
Or like always, often,
Yeah.
sometimes, seldom, never, right? Like that would probably be there's a little bit of interpretation in that scale, but I think that works. But even for the foods, you could list a bunch of things, right? And kind of different categories. But I think you want to select all that apply. Right? Because maybe someone has toast and a banana. My Y looks cool. It's all dotty. I like it. Okay, select all that apply. I told you, survey questions are fun. I would put select all that apply because maybe I like, oats and a banana, or and maybe I like pancakes and sauce, right? Like, because if you had just like, okay, I like pancakes and I like bacon, and you can only choose one. I mean, everyone would always choose bacon, of course, because that's the right answer. Unless you're a vegetarian, in which case you pick pancakes. Or Jewish, or Muslim. But in all other circumstances, it should be bacon. Because bacon's amazing. But you want, if you had to choose between one or the other of them, you probably are going to have a tough time making a choice. So you want to put like, select all that apply. Okay, have I beaten this question to death? It was a really bad question. Okay, On average, how many minutes do you spend on TikTok each day? Less than 30, 30 to 60, more than 60. What do you think?
Need more inputs.
Need more inputs.
Yeah.
Okay.
TikTok is short-based media, so you could literally go on there for like 2 minutes and say, "I have my film."
Okay, so, and so you think you'd have a lot of people that would select less than 30?
No, but I think it's possible.
No, never.
You have
More.
Yeah, you also have the opportunity to give someone to say like, "I don't have TikTok," right?
Okay, so
Someone who just knows, or is like, how many people, like, how many times have you heard people be like, "I'm gonna try and reduce my TikTok use"?
I think she was saying
do you?
half TikTok,
Right.
and then another one say how many minutes. But I think also she said like each day, or like she would put something like cumulative, because I think like at the end you can see embarrassing how many times. Because maybe you just start like 3 minutes and then another 3 minutes and like then cumulative.
Sure. Sorry, yeah.
I
No.
was gonna say the same exact thing, just separating it into two questions. Like it's kind of just assuming again,
That everyone uses TikTok. Sure.
It's also like kind of tough to know the amount of time unless you have like a screen time thing.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess on average, right, you're having people kind of guess. I mean, sometimes people will get around this. So definitely, you should probably have more, like, these categories are very broad, right? Less than 30, 30 to 60, like, these are big slices of time. 0 is not well, I guess, technically speaking, 0 is less than 30. So if people don't use it, I guess they would choose less than 30, but that would skew your results badly. So yeah, the scale here is a problem. I know I have friends who basically say questions like this should just be a box where you enter a number, right? So it's like, on average, I spend 15 minutes a day. On average, I spend 28.75 minutes a day, right? Now, whole numbers only. No decimals. This is the same, by the way, for age. This is the one that actually legitimately drives me a little crazy, especially on online surveys where it's super easy. People will be like, how old are you? Are you 18 to 23? Are you 24 to 27? And I'm just like, just put a stupid box there and say, how old are you? Right? Right? Why put people into the age categories? Like, when you're doing the stuff in SAS or SPSS or R, you can easily then sort those people, but they can just enter their age in a box rather than a scale, right? And then they don't have to read the scale and figure out where they fall. This one actually legit drives me a little crazy because I'm like, you have an online survey platform, and I've designed surveys for online survey platforms. You can just have people put their age into a box. Why are you making them pick a scale? Anyway, I have opinions. Okay, I regularly eat a nutritious breakfast. Is there anything at all wrong with this question?
The definition of nutritious is unclear.
Okay. You guys are on fire today for picking these questions apart. Right, nutritious is vague. Nutritious is vague. Maybe I think Lucky Charms are nutritious. What's that? Carbs could be nutritious. There's lots of sugar. You need carbohydrates to power you. But what happens to me is my children always steal all the marshmallows and leave me with only the disgusting cereal base, which legitimately the Lucky Charms cereal is gross. Yeah, go for it. It does assume that you eat breakfast, right? And regularly. Right? So do you regularly eat breakfast? And, is your breakfast nutritious? Those could be two questions as well. Okay, do I have any more? Okay. What is your opinion of the University of Alberta? Very good, good, neutral, poor, or very poor? You laugh, but when you go do your lab, you're going to see actual surveys that people put out into the world, and one of them is so laughably bad. You're going to think I made it up, but I didn't. Yeah, I mean, you can ask someone's opinion, right?
I think it's kind of like a very almost open-ended question, if that makes sense. Like people can like take the idea of opinion in many different ways because there's so many parts of the University of Alberta. Like are we talking about professors?
Yes.
what tuition.
Is vague, right? Yeah. So like, what part? It's a big institution. Like, is it like the brand, the campus, the professors, the food choices, the bathrooms in Tory? Oh, very poor. Right. Uh, I don't know why they closed them in the first place, but randomly up the stack, bathrooms are just exploding. Like like today, the fifth floor bathroom just exploded, and there's water everywhere on the fifth floor. And the day before, the sixth floor one exploded, and there was water all over the sixth floor. So I think the building is just like it's committing seppuku. It's just like I refuse to stand here any longer. No bathrooms for you. Like sorry, I was like, I went up to the sixth floor and like there's water like coming out of the bathroom. I'm like, uh-oh, that's not good. And then today after the meeting, they're like, just be careful when you walk past the bathroom because the bathroom exploded today. And it's like, yep, the bathrooms in Tory are committing suicide. And it's moving up the stack, so eventually there'll just be a waterfall, just the whole building. It'll be fun. I love Tory. Thankfully, my office is at the bottom, so I have a little while before the horror reaches me. That's right, it's just flooded, right? Maybe it'll kill the mice. The center has mice. It's very bad. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just being silly. All right, why don't we come back to this next week? Why don't we just leave this here? We'll talk about vignette questions, and I got like 70, 100 million more slides here. So we'll keep going next week. Thank you for critiquing these questions that I created. Oh yeah, please. What's up?
So this is just about the mini lab assignments. The last question is explain how these operationalizations can be tested for reliability. I thought we were going to learn about the different reliability tests. So how should we answer that question? So we didn't go over it too much.
That's an interesting question.
Sorry, what's your name? L'Oreal?
Yes.
Yeah. She was saying yesterday in the lab that we should be going over like the different types, like the test one, and then. I think we do. She just made a really good professor in the Oh, it's in the glasses slide.
I don't know if I actually talked about it. Let me take a look.
There's a part where it says like test. I think we only went over the validity really.
Did I miss that? Did I miss something? I'm going to say, I'm going to actually go and take it out because, frankly, let's leave that one out. So I will actually just take it off the assignment, and I'll do that right now. Oops, wrong. It's fine. I'm more interested in the operationalization anyway. So let's not worry about it because I don't think I talked about test retest, and I can't remember where it is in the course. I may have removed it because it confused people and then forgot to take it out of the lab.
I noticed because I looked at both the PowerPoint and the PDF and had it
in the PDF. Okay, I probably took it out.
And then what we went over in class was the PowerPoint.
Yes, I will take it out because I probably took it out because it was confusing to people. And this is where we're talking things like it's not Pearson's R, but it's these other kind of statistical methods. And because we're not doing stats, because I decided not to do them anymore, I'm just gonna let me take that out. Yes, that's just the last question, right? No. I will not. I will not put that on the midterm. It's something that you honestly like to really understand it. You have to go and actually do it. And I think that's why I took it out, and I assumed I'd taken it out of the PowerPoint. Okay, it's now gone, so it's vanished. Fear not. You will be fine. Okay. Goodbye. And now I will go home.